You are listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcast, the only podcast covering all of your teams. Bringing you the best sports news from the state of Georgia, from the professional ranks to the high school levels, we have it all. Today we are joined by Kyle Tait, who covers Atlanta United FC for 92.9 The Game. Kyle, thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Always glad to do it.
So as a new expansion team, you don't always know what you're going to get right away. What is your initial feeling after the first two games?
Well, I think with most expansion teams, you expect a loser out of the gate, and that's not the case at all with Atlanta. I mean, this team with Darren Eales as the president, a guy who has significant experience in the Premier League with West Brom and with Tottenham, and him bringing in Carlos Bocanegra, the former U.S. men's national team captain, and Paul McDonough, who has experience with Orlando City. I mean, it's been remarkable that they've brought in so many guys, and then those guys have gone after a bunch of youth, a bunch of talented players. I mean, the ringleader of it is Miguel Alm on the middle. He's a fast, high-flying, attacking 8-type player, and he's a lot of fun to watch. I mean, the guy never stops moving. He was linked to Arsenal, and you go back 10 years in MLS, you don't see MLS teams stealing players from Premier League teams like Arsenal. So it shows what we're seeing. We're seeing a transitionary period in MLS. We're seeing an aggressive style of putting a team together, and you're seeing a winner right out of the gate here in Atlanta.
So where do you see Atlanta at the end of the season? Is there kind of a win range that you're expecting?
I don't know in terms of wins, but in terms of place in the Eastern Conference, out of the 11 teams, I think they're going to battle for a playoff spot, meaning that they're probably going to be, top 8 or so, top 6 end up making the postseason. Right now, I think they're showing chemistry beyond their years, so to speak. They've only been playing together for about 2 months, and seeing them on the pitch, it looks like they've been playing together for 2 or 3 seasons already at times. So I think we're going to see some inconsistencies, but as the season goes on, you'll see those inconsistencies get less and less, and you'll see them really start to show their true form. So I think that there's a possibility they could be the first expansion team to make the postseason since '09.
And I know it's still really early, but Atlanta's built this team aggressively, as you mentioned. So when do you think the United can fully expect to compete for a title?
I think that, honestly, they have the team and they have the pieces this year to maybe compete for a title, but you never know in soccer. I mean, especially in MLS. MLS, they call it the great wild card because, I mean, you've got teams like, look at Colorado Rapids 2 years ago. They were one of the worst teams in the West. And then last year they put Tim Howard in goal midway through the season, and they weren't giving up any goals. They only scored something like 38 or 39 goals all season, but they only gave up around 30. So they were one of the best teams. They were right there at the top. So to be honest, I mean, with Atlanta, what we've seen so far with a 6-1 win this past weekend and a close 2-1 loss to one of the better sides in the East in New York Red Bulls 2 weeks ago, this team has the tools. It's just a matter of putting it all together. Whether they'll compete for the title this year or not remains to be seen. I mean, there's still 32 games left to play. We're, still in the very infancy of this season. So we'll just have to wait and see. But right now, I think the pieces are there. It's just a matter of Tata Martino getting them all working together and on the same page.
What are your thoughts as to the way Coach Martino has managed the club so far during the games with his lineups and such?
I think it's unlike anything MLS has seen. I think it's a huge coup for MLS to even have a coach like him. I mean, you're talking about a guy who has rubbed elbows with some royalty in soccer, having coached Barcelona and having coached one of the top international sides as well in Argentina. And so for him to actually physically seek out Atlanta United, he called Darren Eales, not the other way around, and said, hey, I'm interested in joining you in this expansion side, because he found it interesting that to build a team from the ground up, that's not something that many managers get an opportunity to do. And so I think that his fast attacking, get on the counterattack, force turnovers. I mean, I picture it as kind of for the non-soccer fan in America, I picture it as a basketball team full court pressing for 90 minutes. These guys are trying to get turnovers around midfield and quickly get it going the other way on the counterattack and have the defense on their heels. And MLS hasn't seen this before. They haven't seen a team that can change gears as well as Atlanta United hopes to be able to do. And they're really changing the complexion of the league as a whole. So I think they definitely have the pieces in place, and they seem to be really, really grasping what Martino wants to do, as we saw last week against a fellow expansion side in Minnesota.
Who do you think is Atlanta United's best player so far this season?
Well, I think that a lot of Atlanta fans would immediately go to Joseph Martinez simply because he scored the hat trick last week. But in my mind, Martinez doesn't have the hat trick unless Miguel Alm is the one forcing the turnovers around midfield and constantly moving around and gaining possession of the ball. So to me, I think it's Almiron. He's only 23. He's from Paraguay. He plays right there in the middle as a center attacking midfielder. And every opportunity that Martinez gets, every opportunity that Yamil Assad gets on the left side and Hector Villalba gets on the right side, it's your playmaker, Almiron, right smack in the middle. And I think that he's as good as any MLS rookie that I've seen in my time following the league. And he's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Everything starts with him, but it doesn't end there. I mean, you've got a lot of good players that have to finish, too. And so far, Martinez has done a really nice job of that.
Who do you think is kind of the early leader for this team?
I think that you have to look to the back line for that, because I've talked so much about the youth up front in Assad and Villalba and Martinez and Almiron, but the veteran status is on the back line. You have a U.S. international in Greg Garza. You have the captain, Michael Parkhurst, who's been in MLS for years. I think those two guys are critical, plus Tyrone Mears, who was on last year's Seattle Sounders MLS Cup team. These are guys who know the league, they know MLS, and so that veteran presence that they bring is important. And I know it might sound like I'm just blowing hot air talking about a veteran presence, but in MLS, it's more difficult, I think, to play in than any other league in the world, because the country is so big. You're talking about 4 different time zones that you're playing in, massive amounts of travel with vastly varying weather conditions. I mean, look at what they played in up in Minnesota in 19-degree weather this past weekend. And then in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, you're going to be playing in 95-degree weather in the South. So it's a very, very bizarre league that has a lot of intricacies that unless you've played in it before, you don't really understand. So that's why I think that Parkhurst and Tyrone Mears and a couple of guys on the back line on the defense are critical for helping this team along. They're guys who, even though they may not have run in Tata Martino's formation, his 4-2-3-1 that he likes to run and pushing the outside backs forward, they may not have run that before, but they're veteran guys who have been in a number of different situations, so they can adapt and they can help the young guys adapt.
When do you think we'll be able to see local young talent Andrew Carelton make his debut with the team?
I hope it's soon. To be honest, I was hoping that he'd be on the bench for the opener, because Bobby Dodd Stadium was on the brink of collapsing that first day simply from the noise and the environment. And that place would have turned upside down if Carlton comes in late. I understand it's a close game. You're playing a top side. You want some more experienced players in there. But I hope that he ends up making the 18 on Saturday against Chicago Fire. I thought against Minnesota United, since there was the possibility of a blowout with Minnesota, struggling out of the gate as they have, that maybe Carlton would make the trip, but he was with the U18s last weekend. So my answer is I don't really know, but I hope it's soon, because obviously Tata Martino sees a role for him. He's on the roster, and any one of these games, he could put the young 16-year-old out there. It could even come after the international break, because you're going to have some guys who are going to be a little bit exhausted from their national team duties when they have their World Cup qualifiers here coming up in a week.
Where do you think is the weakest link with the Atlanta United team? If there's one reason Atlanta does not make the playoffs, where do you think it would be, or what would the reason be?
I think because of the system that they run, they're vulnerable to the counterattack. One thing that's unique to Tata Martino is that his outside backs push really far forward, meaning that you've got 2 defenders. Typically it's Greg Garza on the left and Tyrone Mears on the right. You have these 2 defenders who are basically getting the ball at midfield and becoming a huge part of the attack. That's not typical for most soccer formations. And so if there's a turnover, if Garza happens to turn the ball over at the center circle, the other team gets on the counterattack, and it's left up to 2 guys in the back, Leandro Gonzalez-Perez and Michael Parkhurst, and they're the only 2 defenders who are left. So you are vulnerable at times if there are turnovers. and that's the biggest thing right now. Parkhurst told me yesterday, we talked to him in training, and he said that the biggest thing is communication. It's making sure that he and the holding midfielders, Jeff Lorenowitz, Carlos Carmona, Julian Gressel, that those guys are all on the same page, because if there is a turnover, they're on their heels and they've got to stop that counterattack in a hurry. So that's the biggest weakness that I see, and that's simply because of the system they run, where it's attack, attack, attack. Oh, shoot, it's a turnover. We better get back on defense.
So Atlanta has the challenge of educating some of its fan base. Here in Atlanta, soccer is a little bit of a newer sport. So for some of those new soccer fans, who are some players that are really fun to watch to keep you entertained?
The first one, I've mentioned him already, but it's Miguel Alm. Watch him in the middle. He's number 10, and so if you think about a soccer formation, what Martino likes to run is a 4-2-3-1, and that starts from the back. So you have 4 defenders, 2 holding midfielders, and then 3 sort of attacking midfielders, and then 1 man up top. So what you're looking at is the line of 3, and you want to look at the man in the middle, Miguel Alm. But he's constantly moving, constantly looking not only to get to open space when Atlanta United has the ball, but when they don't have the ball, he's always moving on defense and trying to force those turnovers to get it back. It's amazing to watch how much he runs during a full 90 minutes. And then I think the 2 outside backs as well on the back line, Greg Garza on the left and Tyrone Mears on the right, those guys pushing forward creates a whole new opportunity, because like I said, that's not typical for a soccer formation where you have the backs pushing forward and being a part of the attack, a part of the offense. And so you have guys in the back line for the other team who are guarding Martinez, Almiron, Villalba. They're guarding the guys who are typically on the attack, but then you get Garza and Mears up there and they think, wait, whose guys are those? Well, nobody has them marked because they're defenders. They're not typically up there. So I think that's the funnest part, I guess, to watch this offense, because it's always moving, and it's kind of it can catch you by surprise because they're pushing 6 and 7 guys forward and not leaving a whole lot back on defense.
What do you think it will take for Atlanta United to convince those Atlantans that aren't soccer fans to become full-fledged soccer fanatics?
Well, I think it's already started. I think that Atlanta was ripe for the picking for an MLS side, because, I mean, look at how much the World Cup has blown up in the last, 10 to 15 years. Every time that comes around, the bars are packed out. And I'm not just talking about when the men's national team is playing. I mean, you can go to a bar on a Tuesday morning. I know you guys can't, but one day you'll be able to when you're old enough. But, you can go to a bar on a Tuesday morning and have Spain versus Portugal, and it's still packed out. You still can't find a seat there to watch the game. So I think because the international soccer scene has become such a big deal and there's such a big following for it, the city of Atlanta has really grasped onto that. You have a lot of transient people here. You have a lot of people who are not only from other states, but other countries. It helps that you have one of the busiest airports in the world, so people come in Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, and they just fall in love with Atlanta, because my dad has a saying. He says, you can go to heaven, you can go to hell, but either way, you're connecting through Atlanta on your way. And so, I mean, Atlanta is just kind of the hub. It's the center of a lot of movement in the world. And so MLS being such an international game is kind of the perfect thing for the city to grasp onto. But for the non-soccer fans, I think the fact that it's a fast-paced attack, it's a constant trying to force turnovers and score a lot of goals, that's going to get them hooked. I mean, Darren Eales, the team president, has talked about them like they're the Atlanta Falcons, where, there's going to be this great offense, but the defense at times is going to have some holes and they're going to give up some goals. He said they're a lot more likely to win 5-4 than they are 1-0. So I think that's the most exciting thing. I mean, people in America, they love action, they love goals, and the atmosphere and everything about it. I mean, it just makes it a perfect time, I think, for the city of Atlanta to adopt this team.
So with that high-paced offensive attack, versus Minnesota, Atlanta United set the record for goals by an MLS expansion team when they scored 6, breaking the previous record of 4. Which MLS expansion record do you think will fall next?
I think, and I don't know these records off the top of my head because I really haven't looked a whole lot at the expansion side record book, but I'm sure we'll be talking about it a lot more this year. I think Joseph Martinez has a possibility to be one of the top goal scorers for an expansion team. And to be honest with you, I think that he's going to be in the talk for the Golden Boot by the end of the year. meaning that he's going to score the most goals. And a lot of that has to do partly with his skill, with his speed, but also the pieces around him that we've already talked about. So I think that's a possibility, and I also think that Miguel Alm has a chance to be the league MVP simply because everything goes through Alm on the middle of the field. So I think those are two things to watch out for this season. If they can stay healthy and continue to explode the way that they have in their first two games, I think that those guys have some serious potential to do to have some individual honors by the end of the year. And like I said, this team has a chance to be the first since the Seattle Sounders in 2009 as an expansion team to make the playoffs in their first year. I think that that's a very real possibility, and Atlanta United has that goal. They're not coming in thinking we're just an expansion team, so we'll take what we can get. They came in and aggressively said, we want to build a winning team from day one, and it needs to be an exciting team and scoring a lot of goals, and that's what's going to get these people hooked. So I think that record could end up falling, or that streak could end up falling. They'll be the first team to make the playoffs in 8 years, first expansion team.
And where can fans find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm at Here Kyle Tait on Twitter. That's Hear, like hear as in listen, and my last name's Tait, Here Kyle Tait. And we also have a podcast. It's called Off the Woodwork, and you can follow that on Twitter at OffTheW929 for 929 The Game. And we release that every week. Usually it's the Monday or the Tuesday after a match. It's myself and one of our producers at the station, Craig Carlos Valentino. But we talk all things Atlanta United, MLS, international soccer as they come up, and it's an awesome thing.
All right, Kyle, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys, for having me. Call me back anytime.
All right, and that brings us to the end of our show today. Thank you for listening to the Atlanta Sports Podcast. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at ATL Sportscasts, on our website, atlantasportspodcast.com. You can also subscribe to us in iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher Radio. If you have not done so already, please do subscribe to us. You can rate there and review. It would mean a lot for us to hear how you think we're doing. Please let us know. And if you have any friends that like any team in the state of Georgia, let them know about us. We'd be glad to have them. And we hope to see you next time with another show.